We've got brisk temperatures, but no snow, which is probably good because I have a whole lot of shopping yet to do today. And I don't know how you guys are doing in getting your holiday preparations done, but this brief hour is our opportunity to not worry about some of those to-do lists, instead to look at how do we optimize the national and chapter intersection. So welcome, welcome. As we get started, just a few little things I want to share. First and foremost, that your hosts are, as always, the lovely Bill Highway crew there, pictured smiling. And then, of course, we've got Peter and I from Mariner. You know, we do these webinars just because we really want to build community and we want to share knowledge. And in this particular case, we're also able to bring in knowledge from an outside guru who I think made a tremendous impact on our CEX conference in October, and will so much information that we'll probably be able to continue talking about this in the future. Speaking of which, this is a lovely picture of Diane Major from the Customer Experience Professionals Association. So a little background on Diane. First of all, she was our focus speaker at CEX on journey mapping. She has actually been in this customer service experience area for over 25 years, which is one of the reasons why we were delighted to tap her. She's done this for AT&T. She's done this for a number of other of her own clients before becoming CEO of this new and emerging association. By the way, check out their chapter model, or as we might call it, a non-chapter model. I know the group here that covers the Columbia, Maryland area, and they are doing fabulous things, and they are unencumbered by some of the structures. That's like a little side there. Fun fact, she told us she began her career as a clinical psychologist, which probably explains why she's so passionate about this process. So what I'm going to do today is share some of the knowledge and information that she gave us, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper and share some of the output from that session. In other words, we all did a journey map exercise while we were there. I don't know how many of you were there as we got started. But we did a journey mapping, and so I'm going to integrate the responses and some of the work that we did at the desks in sharing you a little bit more about the journey mapping here. Now, before we get started, I'm going to ask Sarah from Bill Highway if she can launch a poll. I'd like to find out, in terms of the folks that are on here, just tell me, have you created member personas, whether it's for the chapter or national, but have you created member personas? Have you done any journey mapping? Is it just simply you've done neither? So it's multiple choice, so you can check what you need. Just curious to see what folks have that we have on the call, what you guys have already done. So I see so far, give you just a few more seconds here, but it looks like still the majority of you have done neither. So this may be a really good conversation for us to have then as we follow through. So in that case, it's pretty good. Let me go ahead. I really would like to start getting a little background on journey mapping. You'll see a member persona, so you can sort of see that. For those 5 to 8 folks who have done some of this process, I'm going to ask you to really, as we're going through, share your own experience in the chat window. So I know we've got a couple of people on that have done some of this, so go ahead and share in on the chat so we can learn about your experiences as we go along. And just another real quick message about that, you know, you can, of course, put your questions and other comments in that chat section. Depending upon how we end up on time here, we'll also open up the phone lines. All right, so got to get started with the definition of what is journey mapping, just so we're on the same grounds. In essence, a journey mapping is going to be a method or a facilitation technique that helps us understand from the member's perspective what's going on. So it's not unusual, I mean, for us to have some ideas and maybe even have surveys that give us some input. But the journey mapping is really a facilitated process. So it actually pulls in and helps us understand from the member's perspective and the member's words what's happening. The reason why we want to do this is because it truly brings the member story to life. I'm talking about identifying issues and opportunities, communicating issues and opportunities, most importantly, sharing opportunities for improvement and designing new and engaging experiences. So for those of you who've had some experience with journey mapping, share some of the things that you've learned in your process, and tell us a little bit about the process that you did. Let's talk a little bit about what is a journey map. It's a visual illustration. It's going to take a look at a member's relationship really with the organization. There's lots of different ways of doing this. You can see two different versions here on the table. We use the one to the left in our process, which was this wonderful chart when we use Post-it notes and had the opportunity to add ideas and comments and build on each other. But you could also then, of course, translate this to a map itself where you're looking at and highlighting key intersections. So, what are the goals of the journey mapping experience? I loved how when Diane was talking to us, she really helped us understand that it is about the insights and it is about innovating. It really helps us get at the root of some issues, but also very clearly identify some opportunities. And what I really love, though, and this is the part that I want to kind of highlight for just a moment, it has impact because it can help us tie into that ROI. It can help us really assure that when we make decisions about certain, let's say, how we support a chapter or how we do a leadership training or how we structure a membership, we can get some clarity on the impact that that's going to have on our organizations. I think it's worth us just for a moment talking about how this is different from process design. So what you're seeing right now on the screen is an example of when we just simply take a look at the process that someone goes through to have an experience with us. So let's take, for example, a very common one where we're gonna ship a package. You know the store location, yes or no. If you don't, you're gonna go onto a website, you're gonna use a location finder. You do, you drive to the store, you enter it, you prepare the package, you fill out the label. If you have an account, you might just drop the package, right? For us here at Mariner, we oftentimes have the whole thing is taken care of and all we are doing is dropping. If you don't have an account, you might go to the counter or self-checkout. So that makes sense, right? Well, let's look at this kind of a process design if we applied it to, say, for example, a member becoming a volunteer at a chapter. So it might look a little bit different. So I'm asked to volunteer. Do I know the role? Do I understand what I'm saying yes to? Maybe if the answer is no, then I might send an email, I might call someone, I might look on the website for a job description. If I say yes, and I proceed to agreeing to serve. So we've agreed to serve, we accept a meeting invite, we attend the meeting, we get action items, follow-up activity. We have the decision to re-up. We might say yes and continue. We might say no and say it's a time issue. So the beautiful thing about this is it just maps what are those key steps. But if you journey map, look how our picture changes and look at how our understanding changes. So I was asked to be on a conference planning committee, so I asked for more information, didn't hear anything. I finally got some emails with details, but they seemed a bit undetailed, and I felt unsure, like maybe I was supposed to know. So anyway, I sort of did that leap of faith, right? I said yes. I received an email about the meeting time. I arrived at the office, didn't really see the organization's name, so I was a bit unsure. So I called, and you know how this is when you're a new person and you call somebody. She's a little short because she's getting ready for the meeting. Like, I should have known the number. Okay. Get to the meeting. There's not really any self-introductions. Everyone seemed to know each other but me. And I kind of felt like I was in the wrong meeting. The chair did most of the talking, outlined the conference. I asked if, question, can I have different topics? And she said, they're already decided. So then I had to wonder, why were we here? And then she began assigning tasks. I did my tasks, and I decided not to volunteer again. I explained I didn't have time, and my boss wasn't cool with volunteering. How many of your chapter leaders say they can't find volunteers or the volunteers come and go? Well, on the first scenario, just looking back at that, all we saw were the steps. And it's hard for us to help them see where the missing pieces are. If we go through the process, though, from the heart, the mind, the eyes of the member, we can see a lot of places where we could have had a more positive impact. That's the difference, and that's why journey mapping can make a difference for us. Now, from National's perspective, from our particular perspective, think about it this way. If we optimize it through a journey map, we can potentially impact recruiting local-only members. I know that's important for a number of organizations. I think of SHRM, for example, and I've got about a half a dozen, and maybe a number of you have the same situation. If you can find that intersection, you are more likely to recruit those local-only members. Maybe it's about selling a dual membership package. So with that PRSA, and you're going to be talking about them a little bit more, you have to join National to join the local. But selling that membership actually is a way of us ensuring engagement, and engagement drives retention, and retention drives lifetime value. So if I know the intersections, I can find that dual membership. I can create alignment with the chapters. I can certainly make better resource support decisions. And here's one that I think is really important. We, us and our leaders, right, better understand the member, and helps us to, I believe, unlock the solution to engaging the next generation. Let's take a look at a case study. I'm going to walk you through the very details that we discussed at CEX and add a few little extra details based on the impact we got. And let's show how we can use mapping the journey of your local National member to help create the impact that we want in our associations. All right, Public Relations Society of America. I happen to be the exec director for the Maryland chapter. It is a professional society. We got about 21,000 members. There's 100 plus chapters, and we also have professional interest sections. It is a contingent membership. I must join at the national level before I can join the sections or the chapters. I cannot join a chapter if I'm not a member, so just to reiterate that. The dues are going to be predominantly for most professionals are going to be $260. We have a graduated program down to students. We're separately chartered chapters. We have our own EINs, file our own tax returns, have our own IRS designation, and we get the chance to set our local dues. What I love is that National does collect the dues. So in the one invoice process, they will collect our dues, provided we opt into that and give them the dues point. They take a small handling fee, which in my book is perfect. And they do offer quarterly installments for, monthly installments, excuse me, for dues, and we can opt into that as well. Our chapter is we're called the Maryland chapter, but our focus is really on Central Maryland, and it's important for you to know that we have a competition for members who can join the National Capital chapter or the Annapolis chapter. We've been around since 1961, and our basic local dues are $65. Okay, why am I telling you all this? Because I want to talk to you about a member of mine and show you how were National to map this journey, they might be able to get a next gen member really fully engaged. This is a real member. Her name has been changed to protect the innocent, although when I talked to her the other night, she said, you can use my name, but I'm going to still call her Christina Smith, 33 years old. Her education is actually a background of English, lives in Baltimore, married for about 6 years, 2 young children. Now, she came out of her degree in English, got her way into a agency, got involved, very talented as a PR pro. She talks about the fact that she's a member largely for professional development to stay up to date on PR trends. That her challenges, though, are balancing family life, and that, in fact, it's that family, life, job, PRSA in that order, right? So we're not top of her list. We are on her list, thankfully, but we're not top of her list. One of the things that I want you to see as I talk about the journey is how PRSA Maryland has had a good impact on her journey so far, but how national is maybe just, it's on the fringes. And there may be a way that if national and the chapter were working together, we might be able to have some great influence on her. So let's look at her journey. So she began, she attended a chapter event as a guest, picked up some membership information, had to join through the employer, was part of an agency that allowed, they had a certain number of folks that they would pay for, and so she was able to have that membership handled. She, of course, opted into the national, the national and chapter emails and publications. She attended the awards gala because her agency was involved in, and they had put an entry in, and they won. And this was really neat because when she attended the awards gala, she sort of got plugged in and connected, and a board leader saw her, invited her to join a conference planning committee. So she was just sort of on the fringes of that. She attended the annual conference, and then because she had this little bit of engagement, she actually got involved in submitting an item for the chapter awards and won. And that gave her a little bit more interest in co-chairing the conference in 2015 when she was tapped on the shoulder by the chapter board to run, and she was elected. And this is the cool thing, and part of how this tied into her perception is she met a new employer on the chapter board, and she's actually in a new job as almost a year, and is, I just talked with her the other night, and she's thoroughly enjoying it. So that's her journey. So the question we have to ask is, are there places in this journey where there is an opportunity for national and local to connect to serve this member? And why is this important? So PRSA Maryland, just to give you a little bit of background, like a lot of associations, they're running into kind of a stagnant membership. They don't have any shared data, so they do not know of this journey map that Christina has been on. And I happen to know more about her than they know about her right now, because I know she's opted in, but she hasn't been really engaged with the national organization. So let's continue on this story, because this is where it begins to get interesting when you take a look at those steps and you begin to answer key questions on this journey map. And what we're showing you on the screen right now is literally the handout, the big worksheet that we worked with around tables. We got together and we answered the questions together. And we talked about identifying the needs and emotions, and we talked about contributing to the experience, looked at the opportunities, did a little bit of brainstorming, connected it to the why, and then looked at the financial impact. In essence, we're answering 6 critical questions. Are there any specific member needs at the different interactions? What are they trying to accomplish at each of these touch points? What are their opportunities for the chapter and association to deliver a better experience? So we're talking about technology, talent, we're talking about resources, we're talking about processes, okay? Then where are the intersections that we can enhance the experience? This is going to help you make decisions about how you're going to support your chapters. It's really for us to understand the why these opportunities to exist, because then it tells us if we can be effective in responding to those. And then, are there any transitions between the chapter and the association where we can optimize it for the member? There are a lot of questions I just talked about here, but if I could really get your attention, I would say, are there any transitions between chapter and association where you can optimize it? That last question is critical, because there is always an opportunity for a handoff, right? For you to create an experience that lets the local member and locally involved member see you in a different light. It allows the leaders of the chapter to see you in a different light. And when you see each other in a different light, that's when you build alignment. That's when you build excitement and energy and connectivity. So let's look at how these items played off. Let's hone into a step because, you would do this ideally for every one of these steps. Let's hone into this particular step, step 5, when she was tapped on the shoulder to join the conference planning team, okay? Now, why I want to do this is because there are 5 areas that this particular step we can have an impact on nationally. The first is how are volunteer leaders trained? We can create the opportunity for that tap on the shoulder to be as effective as possible. How do we support the organization's volunteers? So when this person says yes, how are we able to help in making sure that that person has a successful experience? This is impacting member engagement. So how can we help in step 5 to assure that the engagement is satisfying? How can we connect with the chapter leadership? This is a huge issue for our chapter leaders. Yes, this is an issue where people are saying, oh my gosh, I can't get volunteers. How can we connect with chapter leadership to make sure that this happens on a regular basis? And how can we connect with members at the chapter level? Give me just a second. I want to put the chat box back up again to make sure that I am seeing if there's any questions coming. So far it's been pretty quiet. Please feel free to put your chats in and let us know what you're thinking as we go along. So, step 5. Let's start by talking about the needs, the emotions, and the expectations. So when we went through this step, the post-it notes you're seeing on your screen were some of the things that we identified about the needs, the emotions, and the expectations. Yes, we're going to send the presentation out, and you bet we will send a link to the archived presentation. So the what here is, what is the member thinking or feeling? Wow, this would be an opportunity to learn about event planning, and I'm in PR, and that could be really useful. I think the other thing too is, oh, somebody noticed me, they like me. This could be pretty cool. But you have to expect that the question is, well, if I say yes, do I have to sell this to my boss? I mean, what's the obligations that I have? And this helps you begin to understand here where are the met and unmet needs. So the next question to ask is, what contributes to the experience? So here it's people and things that they come into contact. So I think we understand that the diversity on the volunteer team, certainly the leader, but we don't always think about the fact that the job description, if it's accurate, but also very importantly, the orientation and the meetings. Remember that scenario? She got to the meeting, she didn't quite know where she was, she didn't get a warm welcome, there weren't good self-introductions. The meetings can really contribute to that experience. And this helps us gain a view of who and what is influencing it so we know where we might be able to have impact. So when we do this, we got to look at those missed opportunities. So I can't do meetings outside the office, right? Lack of orientation. You're defining these pain points. No one else like me in the room. So a couple of years ago, we had a next gen join our board. And when he opted not to renew, I picked up the phone and I had a conversation, and he said, well, nobody else liked me on the board, nobody else with my thinking, and everybody else seemed to be fine with the fact that we were reading reports at board meetings. So no one else like me is definitely a pain point. Now, I think some of us can intuitively know this, but here's the thing. Unless we see it from the member's viewpoint, any solution we give is going to potentially miss. So now comes kind of the important role. We've sort of said, here's what the impacts are. Here's how we've identified a missed opportunity or a challenge. Now let's talk about what's a delightful experience. And you got to look at it from a functional standpoint and an emotional standpoint. So I'm going to ask you to step back and broadly envision what awesome would be like for your member. Imagine the future and your member experience has been absolutely optimal. Let's just take these two things. Let's pause for a moment, because let's take a look at that scenario of that first meeting. It would be awesome if that initial call came from a person talking to the volunteer and explaining in full detail, then providing maybe a link or an email to the job description. And then it's a new person coming. Wouldn't it be great if there had been a follow-up email, right, that said, wow, I'm so delighted you're coming to the first meeting. Let me make sure you know how to get in there. Let me make sure, you know, just go over those details one more time. And so it's sort of an aside. We just did our big gala for PRSA Maryland here, and one of the things we send out right before the gala, because we have so many people that are new, is we send out a really detailed email that answers a lot of questions. And one of the things we get constantly is thumbs up on that email. But our Lifetime Achievement Award winner gave us extra kudos and said that this was the first chapter kind of event where she felt that she knew everything she needed and she was well cared for and well welcomed throughout the process. And that's because of this kind of contact ahead of time. So this is how we envision an awesome experience. You could go a little bit further on this, right? She gets there, and even if she's running late, oh, stop, well, wow, welcome. We understand a little trouble getting here. Hey, guys, let's hang on a second. New person, let's do some introductions, right? So you get the feeling? So you imagine what would be perfect, and then you brainstorm as many characteristics and emotions as you can. A caveat here, no solutions, just end state for the customer. Go for quantity, no judging, no restraints. Let's say you were working this process and you went to a chapter strategic planning session and you were doing this. It'd be really important for you at this point to make sure that people are saying they're not trying to solve for it. Well, we couldn't do that because, or we wouldn't know how to do the email. Make sure that you're getting them to really think about the ideas, right? Quantities. All right, we've done that. Now, what if time, money, and effort were no object? Let's have some fun. I thought this was the most exciting part, quite frankly, of CEX. And how many of you, if any of you were at CEX, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We were bam, bam, beam, bam, just coming up with all kinds of ideas. Well, what if we had leader training that focused on the new volunteer? What if we had a virtual meeting platform that allowed new volunteers to just peek in? What if we had short on-demand video for skills building? What about a national shout out to new members, new volunteers, regular? So like, what if what if I was talking to the chapter leaders? I said, who's your new volunteers? Oh, let me do a shout out on social media. Like, okay, Tia volunteered at the gala. Awesome, whatever, right? What about a free registration to chapter training for new volunteers? So you say to your chapters, we're gonna, you know, there's a registration fee maybe, or maybe you only have a certain per diem. What if you said if the person's brand new, you pay the way, right? Okay, remember, we said money, no object, right? But how many of these things do you guys already do? How many of these are new ideas? Because this is where National can assure that Christina's experience as a new volunteer is good, that the volunteer leader is seen as a welcoming person, and that the chapter is seen as a welcoming person. So I want to get deeper involved, more deeply engaged with the chapter and with the organization. Basically here, generate the ideas, prototype, test. It's all about exploring the many facets of the opportunity. Let me pause for just a moment. I want to see if you guys have any questions or thoughts about what we're talking about. It's pretty quiet there on the chat. Let me know if you've got any, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask any questions. All right. As we try to understand the why, it means that we have to look at the causes to identify the solutions. So if you've gone from this like mass list of ideas, just like we did on the last slide, right? Go back to the why to figure out which of those are going to be the ones that are going to make a difference for you, National, to do. Because we're looking for this intersection. We're looking for where you can have an impact on this step 5. Now, one of the ways to do this, and this is something that Diane shared, and I love this, is the what, why, how laddering. Okay, so let me throw this up there so that you can see. you have the first volunteer experience, and the missing level is it isn't great, right? And it question you have to ask yourself is, what could be causing this issue? Okay, so didn't have a job description, haven't gotten an orientation, tough to leave the office, da da da. But let's hone in on, I haven't gotten an orientation. So why is this occurring? Well, you can, if there isn't a good orientation program in place at the chapter, or one that they can connect, then the way you would fix this particular situation, this volunteer's experience wasn't great because they didn't get good orientation, is to give chapter leaders training on effective orientation. And so finally, that means we can take action by doing maybe chapter leader training. Maybe we're designing and creating an on-demand orientation. So if you look at the what, why, how laddering, the idea here is to identify why an experience was good or wasn't good, and figure out which one of these things you can hone in on. Now, it may be tough for you to hone in on a job description or a clear charge, right? Because the chapter's got to write some of those things. You can't have an impact if it's really, it's tough to leave the office for the volunteer meeting maybe. But you certainly can have an impact on the orientation. And you can certainly do that through both a connection to the chapter leaders and maybe a connection to the members themselves. What you might do with this is take each one of these and say, how can I fix this issue? And then what actions can we take? And you might wind up, let's say there's the 4 areas in blue, and you might come up with 1, 2, or 3 areas for each of those. And then from that, you come up with 2 action items. And then you simply prioritize them. And maybe there's a place where there's a great collaboration with the chapter community. I was talking with someone who has they have a chapter council. They're like, what can the chapter council do? All they do is come up with new things for us to do staff. Well, wait a minute. What if you did a what, why, how laddering exercise with them and got them to co-collaborate on something that will make a meaningful difference that's not just another add-on for staff? So whether you do the whole journey mapping or the whole member personas, just this slide alone could be a great interactive opportunity for you and your chapter. So maybe you want to clip this particular slide when you get the slide deck in there. But let me keep moving on. Part of what's going to help you say yes to doing anything is understanding the impact. So one of the things that we talked about at CEX is that the impact for improving that first volunteer experience, maybe we went to step 5, right? And we want to improve that volunteer experience so that that person gives a high five and stays engaged and then gets connected nationally. So the impact of a positive experience in this particular case could be, I am gaining new skills. And when I'm gaining new skills, I want to volunteer again, and I will volunteer more. And when I volunteer more, I'm more deeply engaged in the organization, and so I will renew, and the national organization, depending on how this membership works, is renewal revenue. So you see, if I optimize the volunteer experience, right, I'm going to go from helping a member get the skills they want to a renewal. Map this out in the journey map. Find out where your ROI is, and then calculate that as part of the budget, budget justification. Make sense? Now, if you look at my gal, here's the deal. Christina had that first volunteer experience. It turned out to be a good one. She got more involved in the chapter. What's really cool is her involvement in the chapter, because she's not involved at national. So you could follow this. She has to be national to be chapter. But she had a good experience, so she's volunteering again, and she's actually on our board again next year. She just got reelected to another term on the board. She told me last night at the gala, 2 nights ago at the gala, that volunteering for the organization has made a difference. It's part of allowing her to be connected more deeply, richly into the community, and it helped her get a job, and she's loving her new job, and she's going to renew. And I just helped National get a renewal. Thank you very much, National. You see, let's understand the impact. Part of you can do this. Let me ask yourself, imagine what the customer would say after the new experience and what behaviors would fall from that, okay? So in this case, I think it's a little bit clear, and maybe some of the other steps it wouldn't have been as clear. So let's say, for example, I applied for the chapter award, and the award process was really good, and I won the award. And what would the chapter say about their new experience? Well, my chapter validated me. And so if it validated me, I'm more likely to take additional training. I don't know. Walk through what the customer might say after that experience to help you get to what the impact is going to be. Okay. One of the things we did was we asked the group at the tables to come up with what would be the impact, and we came up with a number of them, and we talked about, yeah, it's really cool. It will increase renewals. The chapters will have more volunteers. There'll be deeper engagement. So I ask you, if just for a moment, let's just brainstorm. We got a few minutes here. Type in to the chat, what do you think would be the impact of improving a member's volunteer experience at the local level? How do you think that might translate? Are there ways other than increasing renewals? Are there ways other than deepening engagement? Other ways chapters have volunteers? What do you think? Anybody want to throw out something there? Yes, Michelle, I love it. Of course, we sometimes underestimate that. It's getting up. It's the word of mouth, right? Younger emerging leaders, absolutely, Dresden. Thanks for that, because we're really trying to connect to that next gen. And if they have that good experience, we can identify them. Absolutely. Spreading the word. Yes. Christopher, absolutely right. Our people who volunteer for an organization tend to also give to that organization. Yes. And yes, Paula, absolutely. When someone volunteers has a good experience, they will bring other people along. Yes, and I think that's the important thing. Dresden just put in also getting them to participate at National. So one of the interesting things, and I'll just tell a quick story here. One of our volunteers got very involved locally, wound up getting involved with the district, and is now involved at the national level. So when you connect them locally and you get them to see and experience a good volunteer opportunity, they're willing to take on a little bit more, right? It also, there's your farm team, right? So yes, absolutely, Mike. You will find that volunteers will get involved. So I think that when we take the time to do the journey map and we can determine the impact, it really helps us connect to some financial metrics, right? And it's those financial metrics that'll help you get the dollars you need to do this additional support. I remember a association that I worked with a number of years ago. They looked at and they found that I don't remember it clearly, but it was something like the folks that attended local events, they attended like on a 3-to-1, so they were more likely to attend a local event than a national event. And so the ROI to support those local events allowed them to keep people as national members because they were investing in what they saw was accessible education. And in all of this stuff, of course, when you're doing any of this, it helps us determine, it helps us sort of look forward to new experiences and how we might, if we tweak this or change this, how that might change the impact. So for example, just to stay with our example of volunteering, you improve that volunteer experience, you improve the likelihood of that person being satisfied and therefore renewing. So if I did that more, if I magnified that, might I take a lackluster renewal rate and dump it up a number 2? So doing this element helps you look at the here and now and helps you predict where applying some attention or resources might, on the other end, give us some strong impact. So what I tried to do here was to give you a look at one step in how you can align association and chapters and what that impact might be. So let me just give you a quick summary of where we went on this. And then let's see if you guys have questions or if you guys can expand on any of this. So journey mapping helps us gain empathy. It gets the story behind the data, right? And it helps us put the person in some of our decisions. I personally think that, and they give you a little backstory. So the way I know this journey map for Christina is that I gathered 4 of my my next gen folks that were involved in and around the board, and I took them out to breakfast. And I said to them, I want to pick your brains. I'll buy you breakfast. We'll do it before you have to get into work. So we had an early breakfast in a central location, and I basically talked with them about their journey map. I didn't call it a journey map at the time, but I walked through the steps and I listened intently and I took lots of notes. I gained empathy for these really cool emerging leaders. I also understand from doing this that one of them is clearly in line to being a president. 2 of them are clearly not in line to being a president, but they will be powerful influencers in our chapter. And 1 is a real potential either way. So I gained the empathy, and it was a great conversation, and it gave me a chance to ask questions about membership that didn't really, they weren't the standard ones. It wasn't like, well, what are you using? That wasn't it at all. And I understand really the current state. And right now, the current state for most of our chapters is a disconnect with this next generation, right? And that's leading to not having enough volunteers. And not having enough volunteers means that we're not able to produce value, which is causing us then, it's like we're on a wheel, right? Shoom, shoom, shoom. So by understanding the current state, I can actually identify where to make some big decisions. So like, for example, one of the folks that helped us with the gala yesterday at the chapter was very clear she does not want to be on the board, but tell her anytime she can come and show up and be involved and engaged. She will renew because we're tailoring the volunteer opportunities to her. What I really love is that this allows you to reframe the problem, and you're going to reframe it from their perspective. The word client is in here, but think about it from the member's perspective, the wow. When I talked to the one gal, we were talking about, part of the reason why I have these 4 folks for breakfast was because we were trying to figure out how are we going to address some emerging issues on board leadership. And I really wanted to figure out what was going to be the wow. And you know what they told me? They said the wow is half-hour board calls where there's no reports and it's a conversation. Like their view of being on the board was what all of our view was being on the board. But it was crystal clear in having talked with them. And so their incoming president, we change over on January 1st, she and I had a wonderful conversation about how she's going to engage these groups, this group, because we really want to give them the wow opportunities. So it helps us envision the future experience, obviously, and put some measurable goals. It helped us create a plan of action for our local chapter. Now, I'm doing this for the chapter. Let me put in a mindset for a moment. Let's pretend I was the national office. Visioning the future experience is I'm going to have the next gen coming in droves because I'm creating this local experience for these time-strapped young parents, busy career, rising in their career. My future vision is they're all engaged because they're engaged in this ecosystem, and I'm creating all of these experiences. And so I'm going to rethink my chapter support system and really build out an opportunity for volunteers to find their own support system, and for me to create more accessible training for our current leaders so they can bring in this next generation. Now, I love this last step that, and we didn't talk too much about this, but I'm going to give this a real quick heads up on this one, because I love when Diane said to us at CEX, pilot, test, pilot, test, pilot, test. In other words, journey mapping doesn't have to come to, now I have to have a whole strategy. Journey mapping can pull out some things that could be done pretty quickly. Like, for example, if you got a couple of volunteers together who do a really good onboarding process, grab them at a leadership conference and ask them to give you their 5 top tips on getting started as a volunteer, like what's a great volunteer experience, or 5 things that they do with every volunteer that makes a difference. And now all of a sudden you have a 3-minute, 3 to 4 to 5 minute video clip that can help train volunteer leaders to bring this on. So let me ask this question. Let me pause. When we think about any of these elements of the objectives for the journey mapping, which one of these jumps out at you? Just go ahead and type in. Do you think the journey mapping, does it connect with you just better gaining empathy? Does it help? Do you like the idea that it's a future, envisioning the future experience? Is it about the current state? Which of these objectives would be a real compelling reason for you to go down this journey, do you think? Just go ahead and type in. And as I'm asking that question and helping us kind of come to some, what are the action items we can do with the journey mapping? Let me also ask you the question about the journey mapping, which is, do you think this would help you answer your resource questions and help you redirect some support? Yeah, I agree. I love envisioning the future experience. I really think, Brandon, that kind of helps me, from my perspective, it helps me get to some new creative ideas, right? The current state, and then reframing the problems. Yeah, I mean, if we're asking the problem, if we're asking the wrong question or assuming the wrong problem, it's really hard for us to get to a solution that's going to make a difference. Yeah, I think reframing the problem is probably a key one. I'm seeing it coming up a couple of times. So what questions are on your mind about this journey mapping? I know we kind of went through it pretty quickly. And actually, I'm going to do something here. I want to go back to that journey map and show you. Let's bring this map up again. As we're sitting here, because we have a few extra minutes here that I want to ask the question. So we gave you 10 steps, right? From the first in the door, the first introduction to, I'm leaving it off on her journey right now for getting the job. But is there another step here that you see, wow, there's a real opportunity for national? Any particular step here that makes you go, I hadn't thought about that, but what if I did something different here? So it occurs to me, one of the things that came out of my group at CEX is we talked about this, and this is, a little bit related to step 5 and a little bit related to step 8. Any of these volunteer steps, 5, 8, or 9, but if national could really connect with the local chapter leaders and say, give me your new members, give me your new volunteers, and let me do shout outs on LinkedIn, shout outs on Twitter. One of the things that we did with PRSA Maryland is at our gala, we have a page in our book, and I don't have the book right here, I'm looking around to show you, but in our book, we list all of the chapter volunteers, no matter what you did, big, little, or small. And my thought is, if national was, paying attention, they could get all those names. And what if they just took a screen grab and they just and they shouted out there? So I think that's one way. Yeah. Oh, Michelle, awesome. I love that. Yes. The person who brought that person in should get the shout out too. Yes. So Karen, you're asking, how can we make the journey mapping not about resolving one person's problem and gaining more insight into the weaknesses? Yeah, so the advantage, or when I did this with the PRSA Maryland chapter, and so there's probably a couple of different ways to answer, and if other people have some answers to that or some thoughts, please type in. But I very intentionally talked to 4 different folks because I wanted to kind of come the synthesis of those 4, so I'm not solving for one particular one. I wanted to get a sort of a sense of how this generation coming in could how similar and different they were to each other, and what was the overarching thing I could say. And one of the things I really learned again was that this generation is like the boomer generation in terms of they have different ideas and concepts and perspectives of what they want to do as a volunteer, and us understanding that will help us put us on a journey. So my answer to you, Karen, is don't look at it as one person, but talk to a lot of people and then get that synthesis. If you did this, for example, I'm just spitballing here, but let's say you guys go out and you do a bunch of strat plan or planning sessions with a bunch of chapters. Maybe sit down with a group and say, okay, each one of you tell us about your key steps, okay, and then get some summary, and then your whole chapter team getting together and saying, what are the things we're seeing and hearing over and over again? So we're looking for the common things that come up. And I understand someone has asked a question, so let me go. I feel an area of difficulty is out of the database. We know. Oh, okay. So that, Paula, that's actually a really cool question. You're saying that is pulling the people that fit the persona out of the database. So, you know what? It's and I'm not going to say that I am a marketing guru on personas, but part of being able to match people to the personas is going to be the degree to which you are collecting sociographic and not just demographic information, and whether you are tracking engagement data as opposed to purchases. So if you have an AMS, or you're doing something like a higher logic or whatever, and you're tracking engagement, you will be able to, if your engagement and likes and dislikes, you're going to be able to more likely then say, well, if a person has these attributes, they're going to fit into this persona. So when I worked with AA, LL, and I saw the personas and stuff that they were doing, so they were looking at their personas from the standpoint of where they were in their career, what their educational background was, what type of law library that they were in, whether or not they had been engaged at a local level, and there were a couple of other questions. And they were then turning around and tracking those attributes in the database so they could sort of see where people were and they could match them. So it comes down to, and there are lots of some really cool, very talented folks in the association sector who can help you, do that more, to do it with greater ease. But it's a matter of determining in your data tracking, are you tracking the attributes that link back to those personas, so that you can then say, you could do any kind of reporting that would bring that to you. But even if you don't get that, even if to pull them out of the database, thinking in terms of the personas and saying, when I'm doing my marketing message, let's say I'm doing a marketing message for national conference, making sure that I am thinking of those personas. And so if I'm giving the top 5 reasons that you'd come to a conference, that this reason matches persona 1 and this region matches persona 2, persona 3, persona 4, if you understand that. So sometimes it's not so much about being able to pull the people out and connect them to the persona as it might be to connect your messaging to meet those personas. Oh, Michelle, that is a great question. She's asking if I've experienced a national organization who's connecting the dots with the chapters really well. I would say that there are a number of associations who I think are doing pretty robust jobs in this area. And I think if you look at them, you're going to look at the ones who have done. If I was going to say, what makes that, like, what are the characteristics of those associations? They have invested in what I call the 24/7 volunteer training. They've got a portal. They've got available and accessible training. They're doing face-to-face training. They're doing virtual training, and they're doing just-in-time training. They're doing really solid recognition of their volunteers, and at the chapter level, that is. And they're being innovative in how they are rewarding or resourcing the chapters. So they're doing things like not just a chapter scorecard, but instead they're giving out innovation grants, right? So they're saying, try something different, and we'll give you some money towards that. I really like, and I use them a lot, so they probably get inundated. I really like how RAPS, the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, is connecting with their chapters, and they've revised their structure, and they've implemented a really robust volunteer outreach program. They do some really cool different levels of chapter training. They're in the midst of creating an incredible very detailed volunteer training program. So I think that they are doing, I think they're doing a really cool job with that. So I think RAPS is a good idea. I think that Patty and Nadine up at Diabetes Educators are doing a cool job. I know that they've got a new chapter model. I love the approach that they've done in terms of integrating in their online community the pages, not entirely microsites, but pages for their groups. They've done some really great just-in-time training, and I think you see them connecting the dots. And when they last time, and don't quote me on this, but they were charting the path of volunteering through the organization and finding out that a fair number were coming through their local connections. So I think that that's great. So I think that there's those folks, and I'll think a little bit more if you want, and we'll see if we can come up with some additional ideas. I happen to know that there's some really cool people on this webinar, and they should be shouting out and saying, yes, talk to me about the dots that we've connected. Is there a list of organizations that are doing really well to later review and research for best? That's a great question, Tawa. And you know what? Let's do this. I'll put my head with my crew. I'm pointing to my crew that you can't see over at Bill Highway, and we'll pull together some lists. And I think our Experience Squad, which is our 16 incredible people who helped us put together our the CEX, have got some really cool people there that have got some just great ongoing ideas, and I can shout out to a couple of those folks as well. So why don't we see if we can't connect the community together about that way. I don't know if anybody on the phone is on the Component Section Council. Anybody? I really like Christina from Into the Court. Give her a connection. She's with the council. I know Charlotte from Bill Highway is on the council. I know Wes is on the council from RAPS. And I know that they've got a couple of people there that are really doing an incredible job. So any other questions? It sounds like there's been some interest in this program. Hey, Sarah, can you launch that last poll? Let's see at the end of the day how people are feeling about this topic. So how likely are you to consider journey mapping? Very likely. Will consider. No, I would if I had help. And the reason why I put in I would if I have help is because we're happy to bring the community together to do a little bit more about this. So if this is something that you think the community should invest a little bit more time in, we're going to be doing in 2019. We're certainly going to do CEX again, by the way, in October. We are going to do some workshops as well, and we're going to continue these webinars. So if this is a topic that you would like to have, please let us know. Tom asked another question. What effect does paying chapter visits to the national office have on both the chapters and national service? So I would tell you if that I would love to have this conversation, and maybe that would be a future webinar topic to talk about chapter visits from the national office, because I think that it can have a powerful impact if it's done correctly, and my experience has shown me that too often it's a waste because it hasn't been intentional. But I will tell you that at CEX, and I can't remember the name of the organization, but I will get the name for you, and maybe Sarah can pull it out while we're talking. One group is using SurveyMonkey, I think it was, or Wufoo, one of the two, to do pre-questions before they send someone out from the national office to the chapter, and they said it has ramped up the effectiveness of those chapter visits. We got to find that for you, Tella, and get that information to you. All right, guys. You have been a wonderful group of folks. I'm going to scoot over here to our last question here, or last question, last point I want to make here. Whoops. Oh, man. Who put her in charge of this? There we go. 2019 benchmarking study. It is launching. I mean, as we speak, if you did not already say you want to opt in to be on the benchmarking thing, you can go to surveymonkey.com/r/got-chapters and sign up to get an invite to that thing. Or, you know what, better yet, put your email address in the chat box and I will add you to the invite list. The second annual benchmarking study, Mariner Management, Bill Highway, Kevin Horton of Horton Marketing and Research is the guy behind the survey. It's going to be fabulous. Our 2016 was way popular. Be a part of this. Get the results from that. So put in your email addresses and we'll do that. Okay, guys, I got to end with a surfing into 2019. So we'll catch you in 2019. Have fun. Happy holidays. Thanks for joining us today from the Bill Highway crew and the Mariner crew.